What is up, guys, and welcome to day 10 of the 12th podcast of Liftmas. Now, if you're just tuning in, where have you been the last 10 days? Because every single day at 6 a.m. I've released a new episode for you with different themes on how to build momentum into 2025, but more importantly, finish the year strong in 2024. Now, as you can see from today's title, we're talking about the fragile aspects of life. Is fragility a word? Who knows? But basically how life is so frail, but more importantly, how we can build strength for life's toughest moments. And before we even get into this, one of the reasons I wanted to make this its own episode is because, like, we all know someone, maybe you included, we're all getting flus or there's bugs and it's just the time of the year and just everything goes about. But you'll notice that some colds, flus, whatever you want to call it, will impact people differently. And putting that aside, there's then this whole other chunk of the population that the older you are, the definitely more fragile you become. And my mum's recently just fell and broke her arm. And again, in my stepmom's side of the family, like my grandparents, they are, again, have had their own challenges with their illness and whatnot, but all of that sort of stuff happening at this time of year seems to be quite a common thing, and it might be happening to you just now. And I think this is an important episode to have, because before we talk about how frail life can be, I've said it many times before, we take our health for granted, and we are usually like, oh, there's always tomorrow, there's always the next week, there's always a Monday, until there isn't, right? And I know that sounds very morbid, but I really want you to listen to that and think about what is shit that's going on in your life that you need to swallow your pride, send a text, call the person, like, get over the fear, or maybe even the laziness or your ego that's telling you not to do something that really deep down you want to do. Now, this could be a broken relationship, a friendship, a family ship, if you want to call it that. But this time of year, I think people are definitely a bit more sentimental, a bit more forgiving, but also, like, for whatever reason, it seems to be always centered around family and love. So even if you are holding a grudge in your families and that sort of stuff, it's not for me. It's not for my place to say. I think I can only speak to my own experience. But ultimately, life moves very, very fast, and it is so frail. And 1 minute you think you've got all the time in the world, and then the next minute you haven't. And if you're a long-term listener, you would have remembered the episode I done when I turned 30, or was it 31, where I was speaking about how some greys were coming in my beard, and it was a bit of a, oh shit, man, like, life's moving fast, life's moving real fast. And this is, and one side of this conversation as well, it's about grabbing the opportunities in life and not waiting. Like, this goes back to the previous episode we just done recently. Like, why wait to 2025 when you're going to get into this routine? Like, what's some things that you can do now? Because we're all going to get affected with some sort of illness or cold or flu. Maybe not, illness is maybe not the right word, but we all get floored with it. And that's when we're like, oh man, I never want to feel like this again. There's things you can do to mitigate that, but ultimately, right now, if you are in a healthy position, like, you are taking that for granted. There's so many people out there, and sadly, again, on the other side of this, some of you guys might even be going through this, where a close friend, a family member is going through some really struggling times when it comes to their health. And it's almost, especially if it's sudden, right? There's almost this guilt that comes on where you're like, I wish this was 2 weeks ago, because I would have done this. And that's ultimately the question to ask yourself. The things that you're maybe feeling a bit guilt around, if you had to rewind time, what is it that you would do? And sadly, it might take for someone to be in, like, really poor health conditions, or someone passing away in the family. Like, this is the one thing that's my biggest frustration just now with just family in general, that some of the times I've seen some of my family members has been at a funeral, and that's on me too. I'm not saying that's on them. It's just the culture that we've grown up in, that becomes the norm. And I know I'm not alone with that, but it fucking sucks, man. It's so shitty. And this time of year, like, when I was planning the episodes of what the 12 episodes I want to do, that came into my mind. I'm trying to think what it was. I think it was just that and a combination of like clients getting really sick and poor, and they're like, I just had so much momentum. I was just about to get into my rhythm, and it's always when you're about to get into your rhythm that life will throw its curveball, but we can't control it, and unfortunately, it's just part and parcel of the game of life. But what we can do is give ourselves the best chances going into that. So, as I said, before we wanted to do this or dive into the structure of this podcast, I just want to say that, right? So, swallow your pride. This time of year is definitely the one to like reach out to the people you want to reach out to. Oh, but they've not spoke to me, or they've not reached out to me. Who fucking cares, man? Like, when it really boils down to it, is it a conversation you want to have with someone? Do you want to meet up with someone? Do you want to do the fun things with someone? Fucking go do it, man, because we generally are on this earth for a short space of time, then who knows where we end up. So, do the thing, right? Don't sit and wait and like swallow your pride and your ego, and I also get the boundary side of things, that sometimes the sting and the other side of it can be so harsh that you're like, nah, I'm fucking done with this. But I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the Christmas spirit that's floating around. But yeah, do your thing. Anyway, so we're talking about how on one hand, this is how frail life can be, but how do we build strength? Is there a way to build strength and mental toughness that helps us in certain situations, or helps us in all situations? And the answer is yes. And if there's anything that you take away from the messages that I've been putting out over the last couple of weeks, there's been elements where we're talking about fat loss and building muscle and all that sort of stuff, but my main message is all about pain-free movement, which is strength. Resistance training and strength will generally carry us through, more often than not, give us a better success rate in almost any situation, because the compounding effect of constantly showing up for yourself and creating that stress and resistance to get stronger just gets better and better, and you reap more and more rewards. But there's as you know, if you've been tuning into the episodes, there's more and more buckets that we need to fill. It can't just be the gym, fat loss, and how I look, or how strong I can get. There has to be other cups that we fill up too, like our fulfillment, our purpose, our career, the financial aspect, our family, our social connections. There's so many to these to actually dive into, but that will be for a future episode. So let's get into it. Like, why life feels so frail, and why it's not a bad thing, I guess, because let's be honest, if you're like me and you're a bit of a sci-fi geek, or you like any like anime or CGI things, there's always especially in the superhero stuff, the person who can't die, and they're always miserable in the films or shows or whatever you're watching. And I guess there could be some truth to that. I remember watching Vampire Diaries. What a show, by the way. What a show. Actually, I might watch it again. But then they have the whole cast, the originals, where they've been alive. They cannot die in sunlight, like the whole shebang. Like, they can't die, right? And the concept of it, obviously we're not vampires and all this sort of stuff, but the concept of living forever generally would be boring, because there would be no end date. And what happens when there's no end date? Then we get complacent, and with that complacency becomes it's like the short-term reward, but then we feel miserable, and then there's detriments to that. So the reality of physical and emotional fragility, I have no idea what the word is, but we're going to go with it. So, but essentially we see fragile and frail as weak or weakness. And I wrote here that it's not necessarily weakness, it's usually a wake-up call that area needs to start building strength. This goes for your mindset too. Someone's triggering you from a comment they've made on yourself. It's like, well, what's going on there? Why does that person's words have so much emotional control over where you're at? There's deeper, there's a weakness within you that needs to be strengthened. In layman's terms, let's say, oh, my knee starts hurting when I'm squatting. Well, there's a weakness in your body, that your body's giving you that signal back that something's not right. And what do we do when we feel these niggles or these adversities or the fragile aspects of life? We run away from it. We need to face them head on, because that's what ultimately will build resistance and build resilience. So our bodies are resilient, but they definitely need to be cared. They need to have aspects where they're challenged. And it's sad that the whole aging and illness and just general stress really exposes how vulnerable we can be. And there's nothing more vulnerable than being absolutely bedbound. Like just everything's wiped out from under you. And that's why the good old saying of you have 99 problems until you have a health problem. Literally nothing else matters. So the job that you're pursuing, the late nights that you're working, all those social occasions that you're missing, or maybe all the social occasions that you're going to, like all of that, you think you've got so much on your plate until you have a health scare, or you have a health issue, or you have this illness or flu or bug or whatever. That becomes the main priority. And you always look at it like, I guess kids can be a good one, because a lot of people are like, oh, how can you have 2 kids? And then the same people with 2 kids say, oh, how can you have 3 kids? And so on and so forth. I think you always, our bodies adapt to whatever's going on, right? And you always make it work. But how you make it work in the standard that you live to, I guess, is questionable, because the age of technology, food, and what we have access to, we can be very distracted on what the norm is. And if you follow the norm, you will be frail, you will be weak, and you will be very prone to aging, to illnesses, and to stress. So as I was saying, the opportunity is recognising that being fragile, the whole first step of this is the awareness. So let's bring it back to the knee pain. Oh, I'm getting a bit of knee pain when I squat. Being aware that, what is going on there? Like, why am I getting that pain? Instead of just accepting or running away from it. Oh, well, I can't squat anymore. Or, well, that's it. I'm just getting older. And I know it's a joke, right? Most of us joke about it, but it's almost becomes the fucking go-to phrase for everyone. And I think usually light-hearted jokes, there's some truth to it deep down. So let's talk about the foundations of strength in a frail world, right? So physical strength is obviously the main backbone. This every pillar that underpins anything that we do, we need physical strength. There is no situation where being physically stronger than a previous version of yourself doesn't outperform anything. I don't care what it is. Version 1, version 2 of you, version 1 of you is 10% weaker everywhere, and version 2 of you is 10% stronger. So only a 20% difference. Any life situation that comes your way, the stronger version of you has a better chance of coping, dealing, and overcoming that. And I'm not talking about who's got the biggest muscles, who's got the most shredded six-pack, who has the leanest body fat. It has nothing to do with that. It's about your own independence and longevity. That's what strength is. A stronger body and being a stronger person is resilience that comes with independence. If you've known me for a long time, you'll know the phrase, building your physical pension. And I've done a great episode with Rob Westra well over 100 episodes ago. And this concept came from what he posted on his Instagram one day. And I thought, that's a fucking great way of looking at it. Because I'm sitting trying to fight and communicate. Look, going to the gym is so much more than muscle. It's actually this like future-proofing way of living life to its fullest, and everyone's just like, nah. And I heard the phrase, build your physical pension, and it just resonated so much. I was like, what a great way of communicating that. So if you lift weights today, it almost becomes an insurance on your life later in life. Now, with all insurances, I'm going to try and stick this analogy out, there's loopholes. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it's a better safety mechanism of fighting whatever the insurance policy is for. And in this case, it's life. It's your future self. The version of you that you think is so far out in the distance, but you don't realise is going to come round the corner very, very quickly. Now, what would be ways to do this? Well, I'm glad you asked, because you can go back to the previous 10 episodes and get that answer. You can even get a wee workout guide. But just really briefly, the main things are compound lifts is a good place to start. Focusing on these multi-joint, multi-muscle group exercises that just translates very well over to everyday life. So when we look at quality of life, how we walk, we stand up, we jump, there's such a variety on what we can bring into programming. A good program will tick all those boxes for you. And good programming won't just last 12 weeks, it lasts forever. And that forever cycle can be at times of your life when you've got more time and you're doing 5 a week, at other times of life when you're only getting 1 or 2 or 3 in. So it really doesn't matter. Like, the main thing is that you're following some sort of consistency. Now, the message I'll kind of end on with this point is, don't train for aesthetics, train for functionality for movement and for performance, essentially. The aesthetic part, like, I completely get, right? Most of you guys, I don't necessarily train younger guys and girls anymore, actually, because there is a big drive to be aesthetically pleasing to attract the opposite sex, right? And look, I get it. I was there myself. I was even there myself when I had a girlfriend. I was just very fixated on being the biggest and being the strongest, blah, 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 right? But putting that to the side, what I've found, and I'm glad I found this early on in my 20s, so 22 years old, not being able to hold a barbell on my back because my mobility was so terrible, but being the biggest guy in the room didn't really add up. And see, if I'm being honest, see if you go to the gym regularly, you're not going to notice it in your 20s, the difference between you and your peers, but you'll start to notice it in your 30s, and it just the gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. As long as you keep compounding that interest, you keep being consistent with those lifts, honestly, watch what happens. Right, the other one, so that was physical strength. The other one is actual mental strength, mental resilience, building a bulletproof mindset, one would say. So how do we do this? Well, the strongest people aren't the ones that avoid challenges, it's those who run towards it. And that's what I said earlier on. Anytime we're faced with some sort of frail or weakness or adversity in life, our instinct is to run away from it. Fight or flight. Like, which one are you going to choose? Now, there's going to be times where the flight option, the run away from it, might well be the case. But the time that we live in, 9 times out of 10, if we face that situation and we overcome that situation, then we're going to be stronger. Now, what does this look like? How does this work mentally? Well, let's say you're having a whole selection box just because it's the time of the year, right? I'm not saying this is the time to do it, but it's something to consider as you go into the new year. And you have the whole selection box. You're like, fuck, I shouldn't have ate that. Well, it's not that you shouldn't have. When you're looking, you don't like how you feel. So then there's another opportunity for a selection box. And you want to eat it all again, but you're like, no, I don't actually want, because I don't like that feeling that I'm going to get. That's building mental toughness. That's a situation or a challenge, even though it seems so minor, that you've broken through. And that's a very simplistic example. Life's going to test you way harder than whether you're going to eat 5 chocolates or 4, right? There's going to be death. There's going to be maybe breakups. There's going to be job layoffs. Whatever it is, there's going to be more harsh challenges than that situation there. But see, going through that on a day-to-day basis with these micro-adverse situations, that's what builds the resilience up top. And that's why I'm a big believer that as I was working out in the gym and doing the job I used to work in, I was wondering why I felt like I was quite resilient to most people in the office. And most people didn't work out, but what was I exposed to every day? I can't do that many reps with that weight. Oh, I can. The next week, no, like, I'm getting stronger and stronger. I'm creating this layer and layer and layer of like challenges, like these little micro challenges on a day-to-day basis that I'm overcoming, that's building my confidence up. It's building my resilience as well. So exposing yourself to that is probably one of the most key elements that you can do. And that is a great way why the whole resistance training and lifting weights is a good kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone type of thing. Now, if you don't want to do that, what's other things you can do? Well, to be honest, I haven't quite grasped this myself. I just know it works for a lot of people. And it's the whole sort of practicing gratitude on a daily basis. I think this works more for someone who's in a negative headspace, where it's always like the worst situation, the glass half full. No, sorry, the glass half empty instead of the glass half full. So the daily gratification is just about gratitude. It's like reframing the good and the positivity that's in your mind, in your life, and bringing that into your mind. That starts helping that reframe. And I was talking to Gio, who we've had on the podcast. He was in last night, and I kind of asked, like, he's doing something similar. His stuff's all about mindset. Really, really good stuff. But he was talking about like rewiring the brain, just like rewiring a house. And a good analogy was, the more experienced you are as a person, so if you come into this when you're 30 or you come into it when you're 60, the 60-year-old's going to have more undoing of these poor behaviours or these poorer wiring and beliefs that don't quite stand as true as they are today than maybe what they believed 20 years ago, but it's hardwired in. So it's like a spark going into like an old house in the 1950s and having to rip everything off. Like, it's a really good way of thinking of it. So the positive reframing, definitely works, right? And it might seem weird and awkward to start with. Do it for a week, do it for 14 days, watch again how that starts to compound your mental resilience and your bulletproof mindset. Okay, after this, like you do have things like journaling and kind of practicing breath work and mindfulness. I think they've all got good value too. I think, who am I to say what's to work with you, what you should do and what you shouldn't? As long as that gets you towards this building a stronger life for yourself through resistance weights, then look, I'm all ears. So there's also a lot of data on the journaling. Like, some people have journaled for 30 years and there's no reason why they're like some of the most successful people we see in the world. So use that as your process. Do your mindfulness, do kind of follow some sort of meditative practice if that's something you want to give a go. But don't just do it for a week, like generally commit to it. And if it's something that resonates with you, it's going to feel really weird for the first month, couple of months, maybe even the first year. But if you truly gave something, like think about, like most likely you've all lifted weights, right? And some of you have done this for like 5-10 years. Think about the first year of lifting weights. You felt like, no, I know everything. And now think about where you are now. You could think back to the first 6 months in the first year and go, man, I've definitely got better with time. Like, just more efficient, more confident, just doing the movements that you're doing. It's the same with some of these practices. So don't just write them off if they don't work for you in the first couple of months. Like, try and stick it out. Pick a time frame and stick to it. Now, so physical strength, mental strength. One thing I wanted to add in here was the emotional strength as well. Or I guess you could call this the glue that holds everything together, something that pieces it all together. And emotional control, especially when it comes to family, and that is where, maybe not family, sorry, the frailty or the fragile aspects of life usually comes from like neglecting yourself and not sticking to the boundaries. So a wee quote here: you can't pour from an empty cup. You heard that one. Emotional strength comes from when you say no and when you need to start prioritising your well-being. And a lot of you guys really need to hear this, especially this time of year. So you guys who have young families, I mean, I don't have one myself, right? So I can't really relate. And I do genuinely feel for yourself, but the excuse that you're putting them first is only going to work until you have that issue, until you have that scare, until your health starts to decline. And you probably all realised, if you're not keeping up with your workouts, you're not making time for yourself, then your health, whether you have a physical objective thing to compare it to, it is declining because you're not showing up for yourself. You're not building that strength in and around your joints or your body. So combine that with aging, then you're on a faster trajectory, down on a downward spiral. So emotional health is important, and this is this emotional aspect. This is mindset isn't, no, I'm looking after myself. There's the emotional part of the mind and then the mental toughness of the mind. Those two need to go hand in hand. And as I said, it's like the glue that brings everything together. Now, when we break this down even further, which I won't do in today's episodes, because in all honesty, I'm kind of repeating a lot of the same points that I've mentioned over episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So go back and listen to one of them. But essentially, if I run through like a quick breakdown, we've got the main pillars of health. There's a nutrition element, what foods we eat, when we eat foods, the types of foods and all that good stuff. The workouts, what do we do for workouts? How do we build consistency? How do we get disciplined? We got our sleep, and then we got our general water intake, our hydration. Our body is majority of water. So those 4 pillars is a good starting stone to try and nail. And I don't think you ever truly nail them, but you definitely can make drastic improvements on all of those areas. You break this down even further, you've then got working on the structure, your routine, you got your how many steps do you do, prioritizing protein. They're all factors of these key pillars, right? So water, nutrition, working out, resistance training, and sleep. Forgot about the last one there. It's because I need sleep. Those 4 are some of the most, or they should be the 4 pillars to your health, towards your stronger, less fragile life. Now, you could arguably bring in more pillars like recovery, and then maybe there's an element of, I guess supplements would fall into that as well. But then there's the other elements of what other buckets do you pour from, or what other buckets do you start to fill, the things that kind of make you tick. And if you can build strength and show up for yourself, not on just the good days, but also the bad days, that's where you start to separate yourself from the norm. That's where you build discipline. That's where you build the skill of consistency, and that becomes very hard to do at the start. It's a very steep incline at the start, but as you get further and further up that hill, it starts to level out, and you get this magnificent view. Now, that's kind of stealing maybe a couple of points from the mindset guys, but essentially there's a reason why the whole mountain analogy works, because life is very similar to it. So, like, focus on what you can do. As I said at the start, swallow your pride, swallow your ego, and kind of get over yourself a little bit. Like, we are all limited on time, and if things are good just now, then you are in a fortunate position. Make them count, and make them count by not getting so caught up on things that you can't control, because you can't control everything. You can try, but you can't make life perfect. Life's never going to be perfect. But all you can do is control how you prepare for it, and control how you act in certain situations. So if one thing is going to make you fully prepared towards life, it's going to be building strength through those three key things: physical strength, mental resilience, and emotional control. Okay, let's wrap up the episode there. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Some closing points then. You're going to feel, I guess, maybe the word's like powerless, but you don't have to feel powerless in some of these situations. Is there an argument that it's too late? No, you've just got more of a journey to be on to start to rewire the brain a little bit more. You've all got the ability to build strength physically, mentally, emotionally, and that's what's going to carry you through whatever life throws at you. Now, look, if you've been tuning into these episodes, I just want to say thank you for putting your trust in me, because I know sometimes it can be very easy for me to say some of these things, but I'm honestly in this for the love of the game. I want to help as many of you guys as I can, and I know this is a very important subject that I wanted to scratch off. Now, if any of you guys are struggling alone, like, honestly, please reach out. You don't need to try and do this yourself. You can do it with other people, and you can do it with a coach in your corner, or you can do it just with a simple Instagram follow. It could be whatever, and that's what I'm here to do, because I want to help so many more people rediscover what it means to be stronger. As I said, it's not about the muscles, it's not about the aesthetics, it's generally about the resilience that we have to a longer life and a better quality of life. It's all I care about, and I want to help you guys find that too. So let's do it together, and let's see how we respond to it, right? Building that bulletproof mindset and that bulletproof body. So thank you, as I said, for tuning in. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Coach Crossar. Find the joint, I keep saying joint podcast page, that motherfucker's away, it's just me now. The Instagram page at bulletproof mindset __. And remember, the only person that can change us is you. You're the one that has the power to. So with that being said, I'll see you guys on the next one.